Okay, I just wanted to give you guys some tools that might help you a little bit in doing your surfacing. So I just wanted to go over a couple of things that might help you a little bit. In your viewport, when we have an HDRI in, you'll see it in your viewport. So if you come up here on your little menu that's in your viewport right here, and you right click, you go down to viewport background, you'll see it says environment background here. You can switch this to solid color and then you won't see that in here. So right here, edge faces, this is what's in your viewport, okay? And a lot of times it'll default like this. So when you've got in your environment and you have an HDRI in here, it's going to show. Sometimes you may want it to show. I have a tendency when I'm doing my materials, I don't want it to show in here. So I want to turn that off. And that's a simple thing in your viewport. Just come in here and make it solid color. Of course, you know, default in here is gradient color. I have a tendency to want to use solid colors. That way, if I want to do a screen grab, then I don't have a gradient in the background. It's easy for me to composite things together on a solid background when I'm doing sending client screenshots. Okay, now, however, in your active shade when you're doing render, then that is still going to show up. So it's only it doesn't show up here, but it will show up in your renders. Okay. When I'm doing my materials, I normally don't want it showing in here either. So let me show you how we can turn that off. So if you go to render setup, which is this little teapot with the gear, either way, and you go onto your Arnold tab here, your Arnold tab. If you go down to in this area where it says environment, background, and atmosphere. Now this is setting the sample quality of the bounces that are coming onto your object from your light, from the environment. But right here is what's called backplate. And this allows you to load a different image in your backplate or to turn this off completely. So you see by default it's in scene environment. I go in here and I change this to custom color. It'll go to black. I usually don't like black. I want a little bit of depth to it. This is pretty sensitive in here. You don't have to pull it down very far. And then you'll get a gray background in there. Okay. I don't like to get it too light. Something about like that. And so now you've got your HDRI in your viewport and it's lighting it and it's reflecting into it, but I don't have it dropped into the background. So that's inside of your render setup, Arnold tab, pull down here, environment, background, atmosphere, right here, backplate, and that's where you change that. Okay, so here is a shader that I've been working on, a material I've been working on for metal. Now there's some tools that I want to show you that can help you in dealing with this. And let's just make a new view. And then what we want to do is to go in here and let's get, we'll go ahead and just do our curvature. So we're playing with the curvature. And then we just need a physical material. And then let's get a mix RGB. And then we're going to put this on our object. If I select it. And then we'll just do our typical pink and blue in here. There's nothing magical about pink and blue. You can use whatever colors. I just find that these are easiest to kind of bounce off each other. Easy to see what's going on. So we'll put this into our base color, and by default it's going to mix them together. And of course, if I put this at 0, then it's 100% of the one at the top. And if I put it at 100, then it's doing the one at the bottom. And then, of course, if we put some kind of a procedural texture in this, we'll do something like noise. And then by default, usually the noise is so big you can't really see it in here, so you have to really bring it down. We'll say 3. And then we're starting to see it in there. We'll go fractal or turbulence. Now, one of the things that's kind of hard to see right now is because of all this reflection on here. By default, when you use a procedural texture, a physical material, it's kind of porcelain. It's highly reflective. So we just want to come in here and turn that down a little bit so we can just see what's going on a little bit better. Excuse me. And then, of course, the other thing, we've been taught is that we can do what's called clamping to harden the edge of our procedural if we want to. So we can come in here and put a couple of points. And then we're just going to sharpen up this gradient between them. And then I can constrain this left and right. And as if I move it left, that's going to add more white, which is more of the blue pattern in there. And something like that looks pretty good. Okay, so that's basic stuff. We kind of already gone over that, so you're all good with that. So we're just going to kick this out now. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to put our curvature in here. And you can kind of think of a curvature as a procedural texture that what it does is it finds angles between your geometry, and then we'll put, it'll kind of shade that a little bit. So once we have it in here, we see a little bit of it in here, a little bit of it in there too, where we have hard edges. And so as we increase our radius, we'll get more of it in there. We'll turn our spread down a little bit. And then the samples is kind of how much quality or detail that's in it. It takes a little bit longer to render, but you can add a little bit of quality in there. You can also turn that down sometimes, which is interesting. Excuse me. Okay, so okay, so as we're getting that in there, now we can do this as concave or convex. Concave is in the crevices, and then convex is on the top. Okay, and so in our concave, you can see we're getting a little bit in there. Now, I have a multiply in here that I can crank this up, which will make it a little bit more intense. So let's say we like something like that, and convex. Okay, and then we can do both. Now you'll notice when we do both, it waters down. It's not the same intensity that it was before. And the reason is, and I'll show you this, if we go straight in, you'll see that basically we're creating a black and white mask is what we're doing. And so if we have this on convex, it's white out here. If we invert it, concave, it's in here. And we have the ability to put it on both. But you'll see that when we put it on both, that it turns to green and red. Now, that's a green channel and a red channel, and that can be funneled in with some other nodes. But one of the things that we want to do is we really, for what we're doing, because we're using it as a mask, we want this to be black and white. It'll make our life easier. So there's a node called a Range Remapper, which is an OSL node, and we can bring this in. And basically what this does is it converts it to black and white. So if we put this input in here, and then we put it back in there, now you'll see that it's black and white. And that's one of the reasons that when we're using it before, that we're having a hard time getting the colors in intents, because it was reading it as colors. So what we do is we put this remapper in here, then we put it back in. And so now it'll convert that and make it life easier on us. Now you have an output range right here that you can play with, and it'll kind of intensify it. And so this is a nice node because it converts it to black and white, and then I can amplify it also to get a nice intensity into that. And of course, then, you know, we were always playing with before that we could put a procedural like noise or something into our bias, which will start to break that up. And of course, that also can be placed into our bump. And let's go ahead and exaggerate the bump, kick it up really high. 10 is the most that you can do. And you'll see that starts getting us kind of clumping on here. And if we're doing a positive number, then that's going to make it seem like it's something that's sitting on top, like some oil or something that's grime that's on top. And then if we do it as a minus number, then it'll seem like it's etching into it. And a lot of times when you're messing with your bump, you want to go over here and just turn down your base color, because then we can just see what the bump is doing on here without color on it. Okay, these are, you know, fairly simple things, but what's nice is this is all done without having to unwrap anything, and we can get a nice look for this. Okay, so this is the OSL Range Remapper, and just as I've covered before, but just to make sure we understand, is that there's kind of 3 flavors of maps that we're using at any given time in Max. Okay, so we have Max nodes, like this noise is a Max node. Now we don't have to use Max. There are other noises in here. OSL has noises. Arnold has noises. So there are other noises in here. I like this Burcon noise. That's one I've put in here, Burcon. It's really nice. So there are other noises in here to use. Right now I'm just using this simple one. These others can be quite complex. Like this OSL has many options of, you know, different kinds of things. It's like it's merged several of them together. It's probably the closest thing to the Burcon. I really like the Burcon because it stacks its noises. So you've got a set of fractals up top, and then you got another set of fractals down below, and it's kind of like you're stacking on top. So it's got a lot of options. Okay, so in our situation here, this noise is a Max node. This curvature is an Arnold node. And then this Range Remapper is an OSL node. So, and then of course I brought this up, but here's another third party. This is a Burcon And this is a third party that I installed on Macs. It's free. You can download it. And so, you know, third party, Macs, Arnold, OSL. And so we can float around those. The only thing that we just, you know, for sure we can't do is we can't plug an Arnold into a Max node. That won't work. Okay, so that's given us, of course, then we could come in here and play with the idea. Okay, so now, you know, this would be, let's go for, and I think it would help if I turn it on. So that is kind of the color of our surface, and we're going to be doing metal is what we're actually going to be working on here. So if I go this up to be a metal, and then of course if I turn the roughness down, it's going to be more of a reflective metal. And then this is going to be the grunge that we're putting on there. So it's going to be some kind of a dirt kind of look that's on there. We don't get it too. And I think I want to make this look like it's clumping on top. So we're going to go, and I don't think I want to go all the way to that. Let's go maybe a 6. And so then we're getting a nice look on this. And that's just using one shader. Now eventually we'll use like a blend where we use 2 different shaders. We can give different attributes to them, but this is starting to look pretty nice. Now, the other thing I want to show you is, you know, we're building these shaders to put on here, and we're wanting these to look like different metals. Well, there's kind of a trick I can show you how to do that using one shader. Okay, so what we're going to do is we want to get a new node, and this is called one of N color. So we're going to pull this in, one of N color. Now what this is a node is that it's going to read certain information from our scene. And what we're wanting to do is to read material IDs. Now, people get kind of confused on this. Let me save this view. So when I come into an object, we have a section in here, and a lot of times this is going to get all confusing. So you can say open all here or close all. Now what we want to do is we want to get into this area which says Material IDs. By default, when you put a material on something, it's that's ID 1. Okay, and there's several ways that we can create material IDs. If we drop a new shader on a section, it creates a material ID, but we can actually assign these here. So what this allows me to do is if I come in and I grab this set of polygons here, I can type a 2 in here and hit enter, and now that's going to have a second ID number. And let's say that we're thinking this and this are the same piece of metal, but this is maybe some kind of piston that's in here, and I want this to be a different color of metal, a different type of metal. And maybe I want this down here too. So I could go in here and let's go selection by angle. We can click here and let's grow that so we get that whole end right there. And so now we'll give this a 3. And so we can select them here too. So if I go to right here and I put 1 in, hit select, it'll select that. If I put 2 in here, it'll select that one. If I put 3 in here, select that one. So what I have is 3 material IDs, and you can put as many as you want in here. Now, this by itself, this node by itself, does not read material IDs. So what we need is another node in here, and we need a material ID node. So we go in here and we type in material, and you'll see a material ID node. So this is an OSL node 2, and what this node does is it reads material IDs. So what I want to do is to funnel this index into here, and now this is telling this node, oh, I want you to read material IDs on the piece of geometry. So watch what happens when I'm going to place this into the base color. Oops. And then you'll see it's funneling colors in here. It's funneling these colors into our node by material ID. Now this is a huge advantage to us because we could make one really complex material and then have it change its attributes by color in here. Now, this initially gets a little confusing to people because you'll see that the IDs I put in was 1, 2, and 3, and there's a 0 in here. A 0 is normally reserved for vertex ID. So down here on your start index, what you want to do, I mean, you could translate in your head and go, okay, 0 equals 1, 1 equals 2, but I find that confusing. So you can start index right here, and if you put this as a -1, then it's going to ignore this channel. So 1 is 1, 2 is 2, and 3 is 3. So if I go in here to 1 and I make it a blue, you'll see that it's making that blue. And 2, you know, so forth. And you can add these in here or take them away. So I don't need the 4th one. I could delete an input and it'll just give me my 3 here. You know, you'll always have the vertex because that's as a piece of the geometry. So now this gives us a huge advantage for making this look like it has different materials in it. Okay, let's just say a new material library here, and I'm just going to drop this node in there for right now since we already built it. Okay, so here is a complex material, and we're just going to put that back on our object. And so here, this is a complex material that I worked on, and it's got a nice look to it. But now what I want these things is to look like they're different types of metal. If I can get more real estate in here. Don't need that. Okay, so this node right here is determining the color of my metal. Okay. So what I can do here is we're going to call this one Metal Color. And then I'll just copy this. We're going to put that in our input. And then I'm just going to initially paste this color in all of these. So now it's going to go back to the way it was. So now I could come in here and say, okay, Material ID 2, which is this right here. Maybe I want this to be a more kind of a bluish kind of metal. There's a slight blue tint to it. And it's a lighter value. Maybe something like that. And then this one down here, maybe I want to have a slight green tint to it. And so I'm able to shift my materials so it's still going to have the same nature that it had before, but it's going to shift these so that they're slightly different. And let's see here, I think I might. Let's go ahead and hold down our Shift key and let's clone this. And we're going to call this Dirt Color. And our dirt map down here is this. So we're going to go ahead and paste that and everything, and then I'm going to plug that in for my color. And now I can come in here, and if I wanted to, I could shift the actual color of the grunge slightly different from one to the other. And then that's filling in the grunge that's on there to be slightly different. So by using this Material ID, and then using these one of N being however many you want to put in there, that is a color node, that I can alter what's actually happening on this material, and it'll look like they're separate ones. Now, sometimes I want them to be separate materials because I want a distinctly different shader structure to it. But sometimes I really like the shader and I just want it to have a different coloration to it. And so instead of having to make a separate material for this and a separate material for that, I can do it quite rapidly by using Material IDs and then using this OSL 1 to N, and then the Material ID to feed it, and then it's going to read the Material IDs that I put in our objects by coming over here and associating Material ID with a specific piece of geometry, and now I can get a look where it varies that surface. Okay, so things that we learned was a range remapper helps us with our curvature because it's going to convert that to black and white. And then our OSL 1 of N, where I can associate colors with Material IDs, but I do have to drive it with a Material ID for the index, and then this is actually what's reading it, and then it's dividing it and saying, okay, then I want to put this stuff on it. And the trick here is to put a -1 here, then 1 is 1 and 2 and 2 is 3 is 3, and you could have, you can add inputs and you can have more that you want. Okay, hopefully that helps you guys. Thank you very much.